in the heart of Beijing, there exists a place that for hundreds of years, commoners were not even allowed to look at for too long. A city within a city. Red walls so high they seem to swallow the sky. Golden roof tiles reflecting the sunlight as if this place belonged to the gods, not to men. People call it the Forbidden City.
For over 500 years, 24 emperors lived here. Thousands of concubines once knelt on this cold stone ground. Tens of thousands of eunuchs died of old age, without ever truly living as human beings. From the outside, it looks like an architectural masterpiece. But from the within, it is a labyrinth of power, intrigue, and fear. They say this place has nearly 10,000 rooms. But the most terrifying thing is not its vastness. It is the fact that, despite living here their entire lives, many never truly stepped into the sunlight beyond those red walls.
How were you born?
In 1406, the Yongle Emperor ordered my construction. He wanted to create something that no previous dynasty had ever seen. Not just a palace, but the center of the entire universe, the meeting point between heaven and earth. To realize that ambition, 1 million laborers were mobilized from everywhere. Carpenters, stonemasons, prisoners, and peasants. They worked amidst the freezing ice of winter and the scorching heat of summer. Massive stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons were pulled by human strength over hundreds of kilometers on slippery ice roads. The sound of wailing mingled with the clinking of stone chisels, and people dying on the road was a daily occurrence. In that era, the Imperial R's will was the will of heaven. If the Son of Heaven wanted to erect a city in the heart of Beijing, then the entire nation had to bow down and build it. Do you see those red pillars? They were made from rare and precious Phoebe-Genin wood, timber for which men had to venture into deep, poisonous forests, where 10 go, but only one returns. Many lost their lives just to bring a single trunk here. Even the stone foundation beneath your feet holds a grim secret. There are those who, after laying the final stone, could never leave. People call me the pride of ancient Chinese architecture, and indeed, I am beautiful, but power always prefers to clothe itself in such glorious beauty.
People often speak of the Forbidden City as a symbol of peak prosperity, a place where the world's finest treasures were gathered. But looking into the eyes of those who once lived here through the lens of history, I sense a profound sadness. Is it possible that this place was more than just a palace?
You are right. I am a masterpiece, but I am also a life sentence. What do you see here? The glazed roof tiles shimmering under the sun, the pure white marble steps, or the authoritative carvings of winding dragons? All of them are but the bars of a cage, the largest, most magnificent, and most ruthless cage in Chinese history. A cage? Even for those who stood above all others, especially for them. Look at the concubines who had just entered the palace. On their first night, they cried from homesickness, fearing a future they could no longer control. The moment they stepped through those red gates, the outside world became a fading memory. Their lives were confined within 4 soaring walls, where every step was monitored and every word had to be weighed. They spent their youth waiting for the sound of the emperor's footsteps, while surrounded only by the terrifying silence of cold palaces. And let us not forget the eunuchs. They traded their bodies and their dignity just for a place within this cage. I heard their trembling footsteps every time they had to kneel on the frozen stone, enduring lashes they were never permitted to cry out against. They served noble masters, yet they themselves were nothing more than nameless ghosts, vanishing into thin air when their final breath was drawn. The emperor, the loneliest man on earth. They sat upon the throne with the world in their hands, yet dared not trust a single soul. Every bowl of soup they drank, every person they held close, harbored potential conspiracies. The greater the power, the tighter the cage. They had everything, yet lacked the simplest thing: the freedom to live as an ordinary human. I watched young emperors gaze at the sky through the narrow gaps between the halls, longing for a single moment to step outside the capital without a wall of soldiers around them. But in the end, they all died, imprisoned by ritual and responsibility. Humans call me a symbol of supreme power, but they do not know that every brick beneath their feet was built with blood, tears, and secrets that no one dares to mention. Here, life and death are separated only by a single thought of the sovereign. When the gates close, darkness descends. and the souls that remain will be forever trapped within these red walls, never to find a way out.
Behind those crimson walls lies a world where a human life was sometimes worth less than a piece of fine porcelain. Behind the grandeur, the silence hid screams that could never be uttered.
I have witnessed too many deaths. My memory holds not only the names of emperors, but also the count of those whom history chose to forget. There were young concubines who entered my gates at the dawn of their lives. They were taught that a single glance from the emperor could change their destiny forever. But in this court, to be loved was its own kind of danger. One day, you could be a favored consort standing above 10,000 others. The next, a name that no one was permitted to speak. A single slanderous word, a cold look from the empress, or a baseless rumor, was enough to vanish a soul into the cold palace, a place where time stood still and hope slowly withered away. The darkness here is thicker than anywhere else. I have seen those who took their own lives in the dead of night after falling from grace. I have seen those who cast themselves into icy wells in the heart of winter, unable to endure the crushing loneliness. And I have seen those who were granted death by decree, never understanding until their final breath what mistake they had truly made. After they fell, every trace of their existence was erased. No gravestones, no mourners, no one dared to weep too loudly. Their souls cannot depart because they are still waiting for an explanation of justice that power had stripped away. They have become one with the red lacquer of the walls and the biting cold of the floor tiles. In the world of absolute power, silence was the only way to survive. There were nights when the entire palace was submerged in shadows, with only the flickering lanterns swaying in the endless corridors. It was in that very darkness that conspiracies were born. Concubines fought each other for a shred of attention. Officials formed secret factions. Eunuchs traded information for their lives. Everyone smiled to the face, while behind the back, they were ready to push another into the abyss. The most terrifying thing is that this place forced people to stop trusting anyone. Even one's own breath became an object of suspicion. I did not just imprison bodies, I suffocated souls. These spirits have no escape, not because the gates are locked, but because they lost themselves long before they ever had the chance to leave.
So what happened when the age of emperors finally came to an end?
For more than 5 centuries, I believed power would last forever. I watched 24 emperors ascend the throne with pride burning in their eyes. I heard thousands of people kneel beneath me, shouting, "Long live the emperor." There was a time when every decision made within these red walls could alter the fate of an entire empire. Just one sentence from the emperor could bless a family with wealth and glory for generations. But one glance of anger could condemn hundreds to death in silence. Back then, I truly believed I was the center of the world. Every morning, lines of officials in ceremonial robes passed through my gates to the sound of drums and bells echoing through the air. The great halls glowed beneath golden light. Dragon robes swept across endless corridors. Every stone beneath their feet was polished until it reflected the sky itself. Everything within me moved as though this empire would never fall. But time eventually proved something humanity never wants to accept. No dynasty lasts forever. People always believe power is eternal. Yet even the greatest empires, the ones that forced the world to bow before them, eventually become nothing more than history. In 1912, the final imperial dynasty collapsed. Puyi abdicated the throne. For the first time in centuries, the throne inside me no longer belonged to the Son of Heaven. And that day was quieter than anyone imagined. There was no thunder falling from the heavens, no earth-shattering catastrophe, no rivers of blood flooding the palace steps like in the dynastic wars before. There was only silence. A long, terrifying silence. A silence so unfamiliar that even I could hardly recognize myself. The corridors that once echoed with footsteps slowly became empty. The gates that once opened for ministers and concubines began closing beneath layers of dust and time. The great halls that once burned with candlelight every night slowly drowned in darkness. No more eunuchs announcing imperial decrees. No more ministers debating the fate of the empire. No more endless political struggles hidden behind golden curtains. Everything vanished so quickly, it felt like a dream collapsing at dawn. I had watched emperors, who believed they were chosen by heaven itself. They believed the throne would endure forever, passed from one generation to the next. They believed that as long as I remained standing, the empire could never truly die. But in the end, even the throne could not hold back time. The people who once bowed before the emperor slowly turned their backs on the dynasty. New ideas entered China like a storm. And for the first time in centuries, the outside world no longer feared my red walls. I became a relic of an age that no longer existed. A massive shadow standing silently in the flow of history. I once thought war and rebellion were the most terrifying things imaginable. But no, the most terrifying thing was being abandoned by time itself. A place that once held the power of life and death over an empire eventually became nothing more than an aging palace watching the world move on without it. Today, millions of people walk through me every year. They pass through halls that once forced others to kneel in fear. They carry cameras, laugh with friends, and stare at golden rooftops as if visiting an ancient wonder. No one bows before the throne anymore. No one is executed simply for looking at the wrong person. And that is when I realized my era had truly died.
After everything you have witnessed, how do you want people to remember you?
Do not remember me as a beautiful wonder. Because beauty has a way of making people forget the price hidden behind it. People come here, gaze at my golden rooftops and magnificent halls, and admire the glory of a vanished empire. But very few truly hear what still lingers inside these walls. If you stand still long enough at night, you will understand. I have never truly been silent. I still remember the quiet sobbing of young palace maids brought here before they even understood what life was. I remember the trembling footsteps of eunuchs who sacrificed their manhood just across my gates. I remember concubines who spent their entire youth fighting for a single glance from the emperor, only to grow old forgotten behind cold silk curtains. And I remember the emperors too, men who stood at the peak of power, yet never truly lived in peace. People always imagine emperors as men who possessed everything, but I watched them eat in fear of poison, sleep in fear of assassination, live surrounded by thousands of people, yet trust absolutely no one. The closer a person stands to power, the lonelier they become. People believe the throne is the greatest treasure in existence. But after centuries of watching humanity, I came to understand something else. Power is often the most beautiful prison ever created. Those outside would sacrifice everything just to enter it. Those trapped inside spend their entire lives unable to escape. I witnessed people betray friends for power, betray family for power, sacrifice youth, love, and even their humanity just to move one step closer to the throne. And in the end, all of them disappeared. No one carries power into the grave. The emperors who once believed themselves eternal are now reduced to a few lines in history books. The concubines who once inspired envy throughout the palace have turned to dust. The ministers who knelt beneath the throne are names nobody remembers anymore. Time devours everything, and now only I remain, standing like the corpse of a forgotten age. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, when silence consumes every corner of this place, I ask myself whether all those struggles for power were ever truly worth it. How many people sacrificed their lives for power, only for that power to vanish in the end? How many entered this place believing it would make them great, only to be consumed by it instead?